Hi everyone, hope you guys are all having a great day today. In today's video, I'm going to go over BlackBerry Stock because I want to go over the annual meeting earnings conference call in terms of what was stated. I already went over the numbers and did a year-over-year comparison, quarter-over-quarter comparison, plus looked at the outlook for Q2 earnings. That video should pop up right about here. It's about roughly 7 to 8 minutes long. And then if you want to re-listen to that earnings conference call replay, should pop up right about here as well as the replay for the annual meeting should pop up right about here as well. Now, in this video, I'm also going to go over the short interest positions because it did increase, as well as an executive selling shares. In my opinion, it's just for tax purposes, but I'm going to go over the numbers as well for that. And before I get into all those points, I want to go over some form of technical analysis a little bit. It's nothing crazy or in-depth, but we close at $2.49 US, and the market cap is at $1.47 billion. And I want to look at the MAC lines. So the MAC lines indicate if we're in the bearish or bullish movement. And when it's green, it's bullish, indicating that we're currently in the uptrend. And if it's red, it's in the bearish movement, indicating that we're in the downtrend. So 1 month more shorter term, showing that we're in the bullish movement, got reaffirmed because it was slightly green. Now it's a solid green. And then 3 month as well, short term still. Same thing applies, bullish movement, which is good, indicating more upside potentially. 6 month, still short term. Bullish movement still indicating upside as well, which is good, promising. 1 year chart, more of the longer term, bullish movement, which is good. And the 5 year chart, it was in the bullish, crossed over to the bearish, and we're back in the bullish movement with red, slight green, and then solid green. Might be hard to see, but you could see moving up to the upside. Now, short term, long term, all pointing to upside. Now, if we go to the all chart, which is more obviously longer term, we are in the bearish movement, but it could cross over to a bullish movement. Solid red, light red, and potentially could cross over. So in my opinion, one thing to note, by the way, I do own shares in the company, so be aware of that while you're watching this video. And I'm not a professional, so keep that in mind. And please do your own due diligence and research before buying and selling. But in my opinion, I think we could be stabilizing for the most part. And this is a good price where hypothetically we could be going up to the upside based off of what they've stated that they're expecting to be cash flow positive by the end of the fiscal year for both divisions. So hopefully making a profit by next year, which will be reported about March 2025. So for the last Q4 earnings. And during that time frame, they will be giving out a fiscal year forecast for how much revenue that they're expecting to bring in for fiscal year 26. So that will be reported in March of 2025, by the way, for Q4 and the outlook. And then the statement that they stated, it seems like in my projection is June, July. Hopefully they'll be bringing in good profits and the share price should be steadily rising during that time frame. In a way, they stated it in the annual meeting. So I'm going to go over all that stuff, but this could be a good price where we start rising up, hopefully. Nothing's guaranteed, and then the MAC lines are not guaranteed as well. So this is just more an assessment, and I think could happen. News could come out all the time and change the direction overall. But I think we're headed in the right direction. We're making progress overall. In my opinion, that's what I think is happening. Now, in terms of short interest positions, I'm going to go over that, plus the executive in terms of not buying, but being awarded shares and selling shares. I'm going to go over those two things before I get into the annual meeting and the earnings conference call points or statements. Now, for the ticker symbol BB, which is the US side, we have about 8.82% shorted for the stock, which is roughly about 51.99 million shares. For the Canadian side, we have ticker symbol BB.TO for the Toronto Stock Exchange, shorted about 2.81%, which is roughly about 16.59 million shares. The reason why I go over this stuff, by the way, it is important to know how much demand, like in terms of supply and demand, is baked into the stock, because at one point, these shorts have to cover, and the way they cover in terms of closing their positions is buying back the shares because they sold them. And combined right now with this, these are self-reported numbers, by the way, we're roughly about like 11.6% shorted, and about in terms of shares combined, it's about almost 69 million shares shorted. Again, these are self-reported numbers, plus there's other ways to short, which they also have to cover to buy back the shares. And that includes like naked shorts, and there's other ways in terms of where you have to cover as well, so on and so forth with options chains and all that stuff. So the number could be higher. It's not a guarantee. It could be higher than the 11% that I gave, but in my opinion, it's most likely going to be higher because there's no way other people are not shorting in terms of other directions, kind of thing, for lack of a better word. At the same time, though, one thing to note is these are self-reported numbers, but it's not. They could cover at the right time where it doesn't necessarily have to increase the share price dramatically. Another thing to mention is it's not an extremely short territory. to be considered an extremely shorted territory has to be above 20%. Right now, I think it's decently shorted with just the self-reported numbers at a little over 11%. Now for the executive, we have Erickson Mateus, who was awarded about a little over 168,000 shares as of June 28th, 2024, and has sold about 52,549 shares. In my opinion, that's less than 1/3, give or take, and that's for tax purposes, in my opinion. Okay, so now for the points for the annual meeting and for the earnings conference call. They mentioned that the last annual meeting, they had ideas in terms of how to increase shareholders' value. If you remember, in terms of they wanted to spin a second IPO for one of the divisions for the company, but they didn't go with it because they didn't think it was going to result in increasing shareholders' value. And at this point, they stated that they're focused on increasing shareholders' value and are aware of the share price. They think about it every single day and so on and so forth, which is nice to hear. The only problem is if you've been holding the company's share for quite some time, you're aware that even the previous CEO, John Chen, CEO of BlackBerry previously, they mentioned this all the time, but yet it didn't bear any fruit, which is discouraging. But I'm going to share my opinion as to why this time around it could be a little bit different, which is good. And that comes to the point later on within this annual meeting. So I'm going to go over that soon. Now for the next point that they mentioned was they plan to have 2 divisions cash flow positive by the end of the fiscal year, which we're already aware of that before this annual meeting. And then they said that the 2 divisions are linear this time around as well, which is good because even if you increase revenue, but yeah, cost keeps increasing, then your profit margins are small. We're trying to turn a profit at the end of the day. So it's good to hear that the cost is coming down either way, while revenue hopefully is increasing. Another thing was 15 million shares for executive compensation. They wanted that be approved, and it was approved. And they said this is to maintain and attract talent. I'm not necessarily against compensation. I'm actually in favor for it. The only problem is I'm only in favor for it if the compensation matches the performance and the performance is beneficial for the company and so on and so forth. When it's not that case, then that's when I'm against it. But hopefully it does bear fruit. Now, the next point was a question for BlackBerry Ivy in terms of progress, and they stated that it seems like it needs more time than anticipated for it to be scaled due to OEM being slower than expected for software adaptation, which is kind of unfortunate but expected. So in terms of the automotive sector, it is worked in advance in terms of the production, in terms of products and all that stuff, but it takes time for the adaptation to happen. And what we're expecting for is the massive revenue to come in from BlackBerry Ivy, hopefully, and that way the market cap for the company could rise significantly. But at the same time, given the small market cap and it has 2 divisions, cybersecurity and IoT, which we already had before, in my opinion, the cybersecurity side alone could increase the market cap if they just bring in more sales for that division. So hopefully that does happen, because if you look at any competitors, not any, but a lot of competitors for the cybersecurity side, their market cap is higher than $1.47 billion, and they don't have the IoT division as well. So BlackBerry has both divisions. They just need to increase their revenue sales for at least one of the divisions, and then we could have the share price rising. So it is unfortunate that BlackBerry Ivy is not being adapted as soon as possible because the nature of the automotive sector, the way they move and adapt things, but it is going to be coming at one point. So that they are optimistic for that portion of the company. And then back to the share price concern. So the share price concern was brought up many times throughout the call. And like I stated in the past, John Chen stated that it is a concern, so on and so forth. The reason why I think this time around is a little bit different is in terms of John G. Mateo, the way he's moving, the way they have more of a target date when they're going to be cash flow positive. To me, that is reassuring that we are stepping in the right direction. Plus, the way the earnings numbers are coming in, I can see progress being made. And towards the end of the annual meeting, it was stated that they are hopeful that by the same time next year, so June, July of 2025, they are basically expecting that BlackBerry shareholders will be happy owning the company, which is a pretty bold statement in my opinion, because if you've been holding the company for quite some time, you're aware that most of BlackBerry shareholders are not happy owning the company for the time being, seeing the decline and all that stuff, right? Now you could have entered and exited at the right times, but necessarily you're not really considered an investor into the company. You're just more like swing and day trading kind of stuff. So that statement was more for the holders, and that is a pretty bold statement in my opinion to be making, given the track record of the share price. So given the progress, given that statement, and my expectations too, my expectation was June, July of next year, that I've commented before in my videos and stated in my videos too, that I'm going to give them one more quarter after their expected being cash flow positive, which is going to be reported in March of 2025. So in June, July, which is the Q1 earnings after the previous earnings, I'm expecting that the share price should be rising steadily, hopefully, because we'll be seeing revenue rising, which again, profits will be made and hopefully rising as well. Now, the next thing is in terms of earnings call. So a bunch of design wins was mentioned, plus the patent sale was mentioned that was previously reported in last year's fiscal year Q1, which, if you remember, it was roughly about up to $900 million being awarded in a period of seven years, give or take, in payouts. The first chunk was about $235 million, give or take, or slightly over than that. And that was last year's fiscal year Q1. This time I was expecting some kind of payment for it as well, but they said that this fiscal year they're not expecting any revenue coming in for that portion of payments, but they expect next year a decent chunk to be coming in. So be on the lookout for that, which is kind of a little bit unfortunate because that is nice cash that comes in, but hopefully next year is actually decent as they stated. Analyst update will be on October 16th at the New York Stock Exchange. And then another thing is though, so in my opinion, so earnings call wasn't anything crazy and the annual meeting hypothetically wasn't crazy as well, but I will say they are making progress in my opinion, just like I stated earlier. And that is good because if this is truly a good baseline and they start stabilizing and then start going to the upside, then in my opinion, just basically holding / potentially averaging down all stuff could be a good play overall for the time being. And 1 year is quite some time to hold. Hypothetically, it just depends on how long you want to hold for. But the issue is BlackBerry holders have been holding for quite some time. That's the thing. So it's easier said than done to be more patient overall for the time being. But I'm personally holding for the long term anyway. So it's not a big deal, even though going down is always not beneficial. But I'm expecting them to go up from this standpoint, if that makes sense, if the progress continues and from what they're stating is true. But that's basically it for today's video. Thanks again for watching. I do appreciate it. If you guys do consider this video beneficial, consider dropping a like. It does help the channel, so thank you so much for that. I do appreciate it. And if you want to follow me on X and YouTube so you could be notified when I do upload these videos again, consider following me on both channels so that we could be notified when they do get posted. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.